Ace? Ace status report! Again? He's done nothing but find trouble since we've been here. We need to help him.
I can go.
No, wait. Please. Let me handle this. He saved my life and now I owe him one to return the favor. Is that okay with you, boss man?
Are you sure you don't want me to come with you?
I'll be fine on my own. I can assure you of that.
That's fine, but you need to move. Phantom, toss him that rifle, and please, bring him back in one piece.
Don't worry. I'll be back soon.
Ace was no match against the raging elephant and it crushed him with its tusks. He collapsed and blacked out almost immediately. Digital hurried his way to his rescue. Ace was lucky. The elephant caught Digital in the corner of its eye and charged him instead of finishing Ace off. Digital moved as fast as he could and he lined up a shot as he rounded the corner. One well-placed bullet was all it took to incapacitate the crazed beast. Time was of the essence. He hustled over and quickly finished off the elephant and scooped up Ace from the ground. He was hurt badly. Digital carefully placed him in a medical bed and Glomus immediately went to tend to his wounds. Ace lost a lot of blood, but that didn't stop Glomus from yelling at him for being so careless while he applied the medicine to the gouge wounds from the elephant's tusks. At this rate, you'll be a dead man before we get off this planet, and I need you to be at my side when we return to the United Front, Glomus said. Even with his treatment, Ace's right arm still got an infection. He really couldn't catch a break. It was the 5th of December and a cold snap was coming through the jungle. Now that they could rely on electricity, it was time to replace their wood-burning stove with an electric one. This would be more efficient than using their wood supplies as fuel. Bish dismantled the stove and Glomus constructed an electric one. That night, it was so cold that all their crops died. Fortunately, their reserves were stocked up this time. They recently converted their makeshift prison into a guest house, and since then, they've been receiving visits from nearby friendly tribes. A war merchant caravan from the Pact of Engo was passing through with some tradable goods for sale. Blinkstrike, who was more familiar with these neighboring tribes, went to speak with them. They weren't really prepared for the severity of the cold snap and he was freezing. They had an alpaca wool parka that was the perfect fit for Blinkstrike. He purchased that along with some masterwork steel plate armor. That could definitely come in handy for future raids. It was a seamless transaction and he was glad to have a new parka that could keep him warm during this winter season. Ace was still one of their best fighters and he claimed the suit of armor as his own. The others could see the pleased look on his face as he donned his new equipment. The cold snap was beginning to seep into their cavernous home, so they continued to run electrical wiring throughout it while also installing heaters. The idea of ventilated heating and air conditioning was a welcomed improvement to their home, which they still considered it a work in progress. That evening, their scanners picked up another raid group attacking them immediately. It was the Bundy's Devils again. Everyone except for Glomus waited around the corner of the mountain, and when the enemy got into range, they began to open fire. They all had melee weapons, so as long as they kept their distance, they would be fine. One of them dropped dead, but the rest were closing in on the men. They fell back as a group while continuing to rain bullets and arrows at the enemy. They were persistent, and even though they couldn't close the gap, they kept charging in. Finally, after killing another raider, the rest of them cried out to retreat. They knew that if any of them escaped, they would come back later with more men, so they hunted down the stragglers. Fish was fast on his feet. He caught one of the men and slit his throat and moved towards his next target. He found the last fleeing raider and engaged. He blocked a swing from his club and plunged his knife into his chest, killing the last raider. It was a messy fight, but they were able to defend themselves without suffering any harm. The next day, they continued to work on their home base. They were installing lights throughout and laying wooden floor tiles in their workshop. There was still a lot of work to go, but the general consensus was that all the men were starting to feel somewhat comfortable in the confines of their base, and they had plenty of room for growth deeper in the mountain if needed. Just 3 days after their last attack, the Bundy's Devils sent another raiding party their way. They were quite persistent, but it looked like they weren't attacking immediately. Their scanners picked up 6 men, a manageable number, they thought. They were trying to use what little time before the attack wisely, so Glomus snuck out in the rain and laid more sandbags for cover at a better vantage point. Not long after, they began their assault. Tension was cutting through the storm as they approached their line of defense, led by Ace. As the enemy got into range, they opened fire. Their gunmen took cover around the bend of the mountainside while their melee fighters tried closing the gap. One of them was about to break their line, so Ace ordered the men to fall back. They tried to maintain their formation while they fled, firing at the raiders any opportunity they had. Ace's armor provided him good coverage at the cost of mobility. He was too slow and 2 of the clubmen caught up to him. The men stayed in a group and laid cover fire, which was enough for Ace to break free and try to regroup. They finally took one of the raiders down, but at that point, their gunmen caught up to the fight. They continued their hit-and-run tactics until another raider fell. At that point, they moved closer to their base and got a better vantage point on the remaining men. A burst of enemy fire hit Bish as they were passing through their crops. They got him good, but he wasn't going down yet. They fell back into formation, forcing the raiders to move closer. As the Bundy's Devils closed the gap, they continued to open gunfire back and forth. They continued to target Bish since he was already wounded and incapacitated him. Digital readied his club and charged past his allies. Fortunately, they incapacitated another raider, which caused the rest of them to flee. Glomus hurried out to rescue Bish and tend to his wounds while the men picked off the stragglers. Digital chased down the last man standing and made quick work of him. Overall, it was another successful defense except for Bish, who was being treated immediately. But there's still work to be done. The cold rain continued to pour over them while they captured the survivors that seemed capable and cleaned up what loot that was left behind. Blinkstrike finished off one of the wounded men and took the other end to be interrogated. Bish was really shot up, but Glomus was a skilled physician, and even with their more primitive herbal medicine, he was able to get him out of a critical state. Blinkstrike realized their second prisoner was too wounded to be of any value to them, so he stripped him down and executed him. Out of all the supplies that were left from the fighting, the pump-action shotgun and SMG were the most useful. A few of the men were still equipped with bow and arrows, but not any longer. The harsh jungle struck Gorda with the plague. They set up a resting spot for her while she recovered. Their only remaining prisoner from the raid was a fairly competent person. Glomus did his best to patch her gunshot wounds and try to recruit her to their base. But she suffered so much trauma from losing all of her comrades and broke down in her cell. She started hurting herself. It was time to make a dedicated holding area in their base so the outside building could be used as a guest house for their traveling visitors. That afternoon, Blinkstrike was outside in the rain when a nearby panther started to hunt him. He tried to shoot it with his newly acquired shotgun, but it pounced on him too quickly. Bish was nearby and he tried to help, but it was too strong and knocked Blinkstrike out right away. It immediately turned on Bish while Phantom ran out to help. He picked up the shotgun and opened fire while it slashed Bish to the ground as well. Phantom's shot wounded it and let him keep his distance while he picked it off with the final round. Digital came as fast as he could to rescue Blinkstrike while Phantom made his way over to Bish. He just couldn't catch a break right now. Glomus avoided fighting as much as possible so he could be on standby and tend to any injured colonists brought in during conflict. He was exhausted as he treated everyone as quickly as possible. The panther's mouth was dirty and carried bacteria that ended up infecting Blinkstrike's left leg. Even after being treated, it looked like the infection was spreading faster than his body could fight back. At this point, the infection was still minor and they would continue to monitor it. The cold snap finally passed and they began laying out plans for tiled flooring throughout their hallways. Just a couple days later, Blinkstrike's infection was getting worse. If they didn't do something about it, there was a very high chance of it killing him. It was a hard decision, but they needed to amputate his leg to prevent the infection from spreading. He was nervous as he laid in the bed while Glomus fetched some medicine. He reassured Blinkstrike as he gave him a primitive anesthetic to put him under while he went to work. It took a little less than an hour for him to finish the operation. It was a clean cut and it looked like they stopped the infection from moving up his body. He wrapped the stump where his leg used to be and let him rest and recover. This made them realize there was a need for prosthetics workbench to fashion a replacement leg for Blinkstrike. That afternoon, Blinkstrike hobbled over to his room where he cut his hair and started growing in a short beard. With all these changes in his life recently, he felt that a new look was fitting. And even after his physical impairment, he was still able to help with researching new technologies while they crafted him a simple peg leg. When it was ready, they set him back into the med bay to attach it. It was a lot slower with a simple wooden peg leg, but it was better than the alternative of dying to an infection. The following morning, Blinkstrike was successful in recruiting their prisoner to abandon the Bundy's Devils and join their base. Her name was Topi. Topi was a 26-year-old message carrier for the Bundy's Devils. She was enslaved to them when she was younger and was too afraid to leave them until this point. Blinkstrike convinced her that she could use this opportunity to leave them and they would offer protection. None of the other raiders from her attack survived, so she would be assumed dead. She was quite skilled in a lot of areas and was a welcomed addition to their colony. They finally finished their research on geothermal power. Soon they would be able to provide immense amounts of electricity to their base. Now that they were able to provide more than sufficient power to their home, it was time to work towards researching gun turrets to better defend themselves. The next day, a wanderer was passing through and found their base. She was lonely and wanted to join their colony, and in exchange, she promised to do her part in contributing around the base as needed. They didn't see any reason to say no to her request. She was quite skilled overall and they could use the extra help. She found some spare clothing in their storage supply, got dressed, and went inside to introduce herself more formally. Her name was Alex and she was 50 years old, a native to this planet. She was a colony settler, but she was wandering alone for quite some time. She was quite skilled all around, a night owl, and was ready to settle down somewhere. She just happened to find New Houston at the right time. Before taking the time to research gun turrets, they shifted their focus to sterile tiles to make their medical facility more efficient. They also dug out their small holding area and began furnishing it. They'd been raided enough times already, and having a holding cell inside their base would be much more secure. This also allowed them to turn the small outside structure into a dedicated guest house for traveling caravans. Before they knew it, winter had passed and a heat wave came through the jungle. Their central heating system worked well, but now they needed central air conditioning. A hole was dug out by the entrance of their home and they fit in 2 AC units that would help regulate the temperature inside. It was easy enough for them to install, and in order to allow the temperature to truly flow throughout the interiors, they planned to install vents from the hallway into every room. Later that day, they finished their sterile materials research and chose auto doors as their next small task to knock out. Glomus and the other United Front men realized that it marked their 1-year anniversary crash landing on this planet. They were frustrated that they couldn't find ship parts to trade with the locals, and nobody knew where they could get a functioning ship to get off this planet. Time was of the essence, but they still lacked the necessary resources to start constructing their own ship. For now, they would just have to keep their secret safe and continue fortifying New Houston. They began to lay sterile tiles in their medbay to keep it cleaner and safer for anyone that required medical attention. They also had enough resources to build their first geothermal power generator by a nearby geyser. As they were bringing their building supplies to the location, they received a request from a nearby settlement that was looking to make a ridiculously good trade with them. They wanted 18 button-down shirts, and they were willing to trade valuable advanced components, a sub-persona core, and hyperweave. They had 17 days as their window of opportunity, and looking over the map, they saw that the travel time would be a little less than 5 days to get there. They immediately shifted their focus on making this trade in time, which meant packaged survival meals became their top research priority. A new tailor bill was set to make 18 button-down shirts. Glomus was their best tailor, and he volunteered to work on this project. He worked diligently, sewing each shirt together as carefully as he could and dropping it off at their stockpile while bringing more materials to the tailoring bench. Productivity was high in New Houston as they mined out more rooms and were setting up some sculptures to make their base feel a little more homey. They had plenty of materials for their shirts, but as Glomus was making them, others would replace their tattered clothes with the nice new ones that he put together. They could use new outfits, so he added more shirts to his order and continued working as quickly as he could. That evening, they received another notification of a nearby raid. They weren't attacking immediately, which bought some time for them to plan out additional defenses. They wanted to make sure their geothermal generator was protected, so they would eventually surround it in a limestone wall. A line of sandbags would be placed next to it with a good vantage point down the opening in between the 2 mountains where they could engage with any attackers. That night, they moved into their defense point and prepared for the invasion. But there was a problem. The raiders split into 2 groups and half of them went the other direction towards their base. They weren't prepared for that, so Blinkstrike, Alex, and Phantom took what little cover they could find by their crops while Ace and Digital covered the left side. Blinkstrike anxiously waited for them to come into range, and he heard the gunfire from the other side of the jungle. The raiders hugged the mountain and avoided their cover, trying to get a flank on the 2 men. Digital fired into the first raider and a well-placed shot dropped her immediately. Ace tried to move into pistol range and took a direct hit. He screamed out in pain while Digital laid cover fire so he could close in on her. On the other side, a raider was hiding between debris and took cover from their suppression fire. A burst from his SMG hit Blinkstrike and he collapsed. The other raider tried to attack Alex with a knife and she engaged with her melee weapon. On the other side, Ace was slowly moving in, but he got hit by another bullet. The raiders were overwhelmed and began to flee. Ace hit the raider as she came out of cover and instantly killed her. Phantom told Alex to take Blinkstrike to Glomus and he went to hunt the final raider down. A bullet from the burst of the SMG grazed him and he realized it was too dangerous to keep up his pursuit. It was a successful defense, but they were hurting from the aftermath of the firefight. All the wounded men went to the med bay. Glomus rolled up his sleeves and got to work. Fortunately, nobody was in a critical state, so they could rest easy that night. The next morning, Ace got an infection from the gunshot wound in his torso. They had to take extra care of him to make sure it didn't get worse. Topi tended to him while Glomus got some much-needed rest. The stress was a little too overbearing for Glomus, and it caused him to go into a wandering daze. New Houston was a bloody mess right now, but they were slowly recovering from their wounds and trying to continue the development deeper into their mountain base. Right now, they needed to expand the number of rooms available. They were a little short, and some of the colonists had to sleep in the med bay and holding area for the time being. The last attack made them realize that they needed a larger med bay. They planned to expand the area and double the bed count from 4 to 8. They could also use more storage space, so they planned out another area for that. As Digital was digging out extra space, Ace developed immunity to the infection and it stopped from spreading. He was a tough fighter after all. Their research on packaged survival meals was completed, so they put their focus back towards gun turrets. On the 12th of April, Glomus was able to finish his tailor bill and sew the entire order of 18 shirts. The time came for them to send a caravan off so they could make this very beneficial trade. They wanted to make sure that they didn't leave their home vulnerable, so they decided to only take 2 people on this trip. Alex was familiar with that area, so she volunteered, and Bish wanted to get a better idea of the territory, so he asked to go with her. They packed their food supplies and the shipment of shirts. It would be about 4.5 days to travel one way. They confirmed the details with Glomus and began to pack up their things. Bish was excited to travel outside of the jungle, and these advanced components would be very valuable towards helping them achieve their ultimate goal of getting off this planet. Their bags were packed, they said their goodbyes, and late into the night, they left New Houston for a very important mission. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Special thanks to those that helped with the voice acting. I really appreciate your excellent work. I also wanted to thank my newest patrons, Bad Burrito 316, Spammed, Lackey's, Jonathan Conroy, Jorge Acosta, and Matthew Lucas. Thank you so much for your support. I really appreciate it so much. And a big thanks to all of my patrons who are helping support me with the ultimate goal of one day turning this hobby into a full-time job so I can focus on making this kind of content much more regularly. Thanks so much, everyone. As always, thanks for watching, and until next time, have a good one.